Commander Leah stood at the massive viewing window of the Zalorian Central Command Station. Her four-fingered hands were clasped tightly behind her back as she watched the last Allied ships disappear into hyperspace. Each flash of light took with it another fragment of hope for her people's survival. "They're all gone now," said Officer Creel, her second-in-command. His voice was flat, empty of the emotion that had filled it during the heated debates of the past several days. "Yes," Leah replied simply. What else was there to say? The Valerian Council, the governing body of the most powerful species in the known galaxy, had made their decision. The Zalorians were to be abandoned. The quarantine would begin within hours. No ships would be permitted to enter or leave the Zalorian system. No communications would be allowed through the barrier. The once proud Zalorian people, with their cities of crystal and light that had stood for thousands of years, were now completely on their own. "The plague was an accident," Krill said, his outer eyelids blinking rapidly in distress. "They know that. Our scientists were trying to help that dying world, not harm it." Leah turned from the window. The command center around her was eerily quiet. Normally, it would be bustling with activity, filled with the sounds of officers coordinating the movements of the Zalorian defense fleet and monitoring trade routes. Now half the stations were empty. Many of her officers had already succumbed to the same plague that had escaped their containment labs and spread to 3 neighboring systems before it could be controlled. "The Council doesn't care about intent," she said. "They care about results. And the result is that over 4 million non-Zalorians died, along with 6 million of our own people," Krell added bitterly. "But that part doesn't seem to matter to them." Leah walked to the central command table, where a holographic display showed the current status of their world. Red zones, areas where the plague was still active, covered nearly 30% of the map. Yellow zones, areas under quarantine but with active cases, made up another 40%. The small patches of green, safe zones, were shrinking. By the day, "We need to address the people," she said. "They deserve to know what's happening." Krell gestured to a young communications officer who had been waiting quietly nearby. "We're ready whenever you are, Commander." Leah straightened her uniform, a habit from better days when appearances mattered. Now, with her people dying and abandoned by their allies, it seemed almost absurd to care about such things. Yet habits provided comfort in times of chaos. She nodded, and the officer activated the planet-wide emergency broadcast system. Leah's image would now be projected in every Zalorian city, town, and outpost still functioning. "People of Zaloria," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "As of today, the Galactic Concord has voted to establish a complete quarantine of our system. All of our former allies have withdrawn their support. We face this crisis alone." She paused, letting the information sink in. "I will not offer false hope. Our situation is grave. Our medical facilities are overwhelmed, our resources are limited, but we are Zalorians. For 10,000 years, since we first looked to the stars, we have faced challenges with courage and intelligence. This will be no different." Leah outlined the new rationing programs that would take effect immediately. She explained how all remaining resources would be diverted to medical research. She announced the formation of community support networks to care for the sick and orphaned. When she finished, the command center was silent again. There was no applause, no renewed sense of purpose, just the heavy weight of what lay ahead. "That was well said," Krell offered finally. "Words won't save us," Leah replied. "But they're all I have right now." The next 6 cycles passed in a blur of crisis management. Each day brought new challenges as the Zalorian infrastructure continued to break down. Power failures became common as the engineers who maintained the fusion plants fell ill. Food production dropped as agricultural workers died at their posts. The automated systems that had once been the pride of Zalorian technology began to fail without proper maintenance. Leah slept little, moving between the command center and the emergency response headquarters they'd established in what had once been the Planetary Arts Center. Its vast spaces now housed thousands of the sick and dying. The quarantine barrier, visible from the planet's surface as a faint shimmer in the night sky, was impenetrable. Early on, several private vessels had attempted to break through, piloted by desperate Zalorians trying to escape. Each one had been destroyed on contact with the energy field. By the beginning of the sixth cycle, the Zalorian population had been reduced by nearly half. Those who survived either had natural immunity or had managed to avoid exposure by retreating to isolated communities. Leah had relocated the central government to an underground complex that had once been a scientific research facility. It was there, during a rare moment of rest, that Officer Krell burst into her quarters without ceremony. "Commander, you need to see this," he said, his voice containing something Leah hadn't heard in a long time: excitement. She followed him quickly to the facility's small observatory, where a group of scientists and military officers had gathered around a monitoring station. "What is it?" she asked. An older scientist, Professor Venn, looked up from the display. "Something impossible," he said. "A ship is approaching the quarantine barrier." "One of ours?" Leah asked, though she knew the answer. There were no Zalorian ships left that could achieve orbit. "No," said Professor Venn. "It's not one of ours. And it's not from any conquered world either. We don't recognize the design." Leah looked at the display. The ship was unlike anything she had seen before. It had a sleek design but was clearly built for function rather than aesthetics. It was approaching the barrier directly, making no attempt to hide its presence. "Are they going to try to break through?" she asked. "The barrier will destroy them. That's the impossible part," said Professor Venn. "Look." On the screen, the unknown ship reached the barrier, but instead of being destroyed on contact, it seemed to shimmer slightly. Then, to the amazement of everyone watching, it passed through the barrier as if it weren't there. "How?" Krell whispered. "The Valerians said the barrier was impenetrable." "Apparently, not to these people," Leah said. "Can we communicate with them?" A communications officer nodded. "They're actually broadcasting already, Commander, on all frequencies. They're looking for us." "Put it through," Leah ordered. A voice filled the observatory, clear, confident, and speaking an accented but understandable galactic standard. "This is Captain Alan Wright of the Earth vessel Constellation. We've received your distress signal and are here to offer assistance. Zalorian Command, please respond if you're receiving this transmission." Silence fell over the room. Earth. Most. Zalorians had only heard of humans in passing, a young species from a peripheral world, deemed too aggressive and unpredictable for full Concord membership. The Valerian Council had explicitly forbidden contact with them nearly a century ago, claiming they were not yet ready for integration into galactic society. Yet here they were, somehow passing through a barrier that the most advanced species in the galaxy had created, and they had come not to exploit or observe but to help. Leah stepped forward and activated the communication system. "Captain Wright, this is Commander Leah of Zalorian Central Command. We are receiving your transmission." She paused, then added, "We had given up hope of any response to our distress calls." There was a brief silence. Then the human's voice returned. Warmer now. "Commander Leah, we're glad to find you. We've been monitoring the situation from outside the quarantine zone. We have medical personnel, supplies, and technology that may help your people. Request permission to approach and send landing parties to your location." Leah looked around at her officers and advisors. Their expressions reflected her own mix of hope and suspicion. After being abandoned by their supposed allies, trust did not come easily. But what choice did they have? "Permission granted, Captain Wright," she said. "We'll transmit coordinates for landing, and thank you." "No thanks needed, Commander," came the reply. "Humans don't leave people to die when we can help." Constellation out. As the transmission ended, Leah felt something stir within her, an unfamiliar feeling she eventually recognized as hope. The main hall of the Zalorian underground complex buzzed with nervous energy. Commander Leia had ordered it cleared and prepared for the arrival of the humans. Once, this space had hosted scientific conferences where the brightest minds in the galaxy shared knowledge. Now its high ceilings were dim, the power reduced to save energy, and many of its elegant fixtures had been removed for parts. "The human shuttle has entered our atmosphere," Officer Krell reported, checking his handheld monitor. "Their estimated arrival time is 12 minutes. Leah nodded, trying to maintain her composure. She had selected a small welcome group, just herself, Krell, 2 security officers, and Professor Venn, their lead medical researcher. Too many others wanted to witness this historic moment, but Leah couldn't risk exposing the humans to any potential carriers of the plague. "What do we actually know about humans?" she asked Professor Venn, who had been frantically researching all available information on Earth in the hours since first contact. The elderly scientist adjusted his breathing apparatus, a sign his lungs were beginning to fail, though he refused to acknowledge it. "Not nearly enough," he admitted. "The Concord restricted information about Earth after classifying them as a quarantined species." "Ironic," Krell muttered. "Indeed," Venn continued. "From what I could piece together, humans evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme biodiversity. Their planet experienced more extinction events than most habitable worlds, yet life always recovered. Humans themselves nearly destroyed their civilization several times but managed to unite and reach the stars about 3 centuries ago. And the Concord rejected them," Leah said. "It wasn't a question. The official record states they were delayed for membership consideration due to cultural and biological concerns. The Valerians were particularly opposed to their inclusion." Before they could discuss further, a security officer interrupted. "Commander, they've landed. The humans are at the entrance checkpoint." Leah straightened her uniform. "Bring them in." The doors to the hall slid open, and 3 figures entered. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed to be made of a material that shifted colors slightly as they moved. Their faces were visible, behind clear helmets. Leah was struck by how similar they looked to Zalorians in basic body structure, though their skin tones varied from light to dark brown, and they had hair on their heads instead of the sensory ridges Zalorians possessed. The leader stepped forward and removed his helmet in a gesture that made the Zalorians gasp. Exposing himself to the potentially contaminated air was either foolish or a powerful sign of trust. "Commander Leah," he said with a slight bow. "I'm Captain Alan Wright of the Earth Vessel Constellation. With me are Dr. Samantha Kelly, our chief medical officer, and Lieutenant Greg Porter, head of security." The woman, Dr. Kelly, and the other man also removed their helmets. Dr. Kelly had dark hair pulled back tightly and keen eyes that seemed to be taking in everything at once. Lieutenant Porter was broader than the others, with a watchful gaze that reminded Leah of her best security officers. "You remove your protective gear so casually," Professor Venn said, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. "Aren't you concerned about the plague?" Dr. Kelly stepped forward. "We've analyzed the pathogen from samples we collected in orbit. It targets a specific protein structure in Zalorian lung tissue. Humans don't have this protein, so we're naturally immune." This revelation sent a murmur through the small Zalorian group. The plague that had decimated their population wouldn't even affect these visitors. "Please, follow me," Leah said, leading them to a conference room adjacent to the main hall. Once they were seated, she addressed the question foremost in her mind. "Captain Wright, how did your vessel pass through the quarantine barrier?" The Valerian Council assured us it was impenetrable. Wright exchanged glances with his companions before answering. "The barrier uses a specific phase harmonic technology. Earth developed countermeasures during our, let's call them, unofficial interactions with the Concord over the past few decades." "You've been fighting the Concord?" Krell asked, alarmed. "Not fighting," Lieutenant Porter clarified. "But they've tried to restrict our expansion and trade. We've had to find creative solutions." "Why help us?" Leah asked directly. "The Concord abandoned us. We have little to offer in return." Captain Wright leaned forward, his expression serious. "Commander, humanity knows what it's like to face extinction alone. Our history is filled with plagues that nearly wiped us out. Each time we survived because we adapted, because we refused to give up. And because your biology is remarkably resilient." Dr. Kelly added. She activated a small device that projected images into the air between them, microscopic views of cells and molecular structures. Your plague is devastating, but it's not as complex as some we've overcome. We believe we can help. How? Professor Venn asked, hope and skepticism warring in his voice. I've brought a team of 20 medical specialists and 10 tons of equipment, Dr. Kelly explained. We need to establish a research lab immediately and begin synthesizing treatment options. With samples from your survivors who have natural immunity, we can work on a more permanent solution. Leah studied the humans carefully. Their offer seemed too good to be true, and her people had already been betrayed once. What do you want in return, Captain Wright? No one helps others without expecting something back. Wright smiled slightly. You sound like our diplomats. Yes, Earth has interest here. We want to establish relations with species outside the Conquered's control. We want to show the galaxy that humanity isn't what the Valerians claim we are. And frankly, we're curious about your technology and culture. He stood and walked to the window that overlooked the dim main hall. But right now, those are secondary concerns. Right now, we just want to stop people from dying when we have the means to help. Professor Venn wheezed slightly as his breathing apparatus struggled to keep up with his excitement. Commander, we must accept their help. Even if they're being entirely honest, what choice do we have? Leah knew he was right. Her people were dying. Their civilization was collapsing. If the humans could truly help, any price would be worth paying. Very well, Captain Wright, she said formally. On behalf of the Zalorian people, I accept your offer of assistance. Excellent, Dr. Kelly said. All business now. I need to see your medical facilities immediately, and I'll need access to all your research on the plague. Of course, Leah replied, gesturing to Professor Venn. The professor will take you to our medical center. As Dr. Kelly and Professor Venn left, Captain Wright turned to Leah. Commander, there's something else you should know. The Constellation didn't come alone. We have 2 more ships waiting outside the barrier. Once we've established a base here, they'll bring additional supplies and personnel. Leia was stunned. 3 ships? For a rescue mission to an abandoned world? Lieutenant Porter smiled for the first time. Captain Wright neglected to mention that the Constellation is our smallest vessel. The others couldn't fit through our first breach in the barrier. We're working on widening it now. Why would Earth commit so many resources to help us? Leah asked. Captain Wright's expression became more serious. Because it's the right thing to do. And because humanity remembers what it's like when more advanced civilizations decide you're not worth saving. For the first time in many cycles, Leah felt a genuine smile form. Perhaps the galaxy had abandoned them, but they had found allies in the most unexpected place. 3 weeks after the humans' arrival, the main medical center in the Zalorian underground complex was transformed. What had once been a desperate place of suffering was now buzzing with purposeful activity. Human and Zalorian medical staff worked, side by side, using equipment that had arrived on the second human ship, the Horizon. Dr. Samantha Kelly studied the latest test results on her tablet. The early treatment she had developed was working better than expected. Death rates had dropped by 60% already. She looked up as Commander Leah entered the lab. Commander, she greeted with a tired smile. Good news. The blood samples from the survivors in the eastern settlements show exactly what we hoped for. Their natural immunity has some unique properties we can use in the next version of the treatment. Leah nodded, but her expression remained serious. That is good news, Dr. Kelly. But I came to speak with you about something else. Our long-range sensors detected unusual activity near the edge of our system. We think the Conquered might be sending observers. Does Captain Wright know? Dr. Kelly asked, setting down her tablet. He's meeting with Lieutenant Porter and Engineer Martinez about it now. They've been working on strengthening our defense options. Engineer Olivia Martinez had arrived on the Horizon. She and her team had been helping the Zalorians repair their failing infrastructure. In just 3 weeks, they had restored power to most of the main settlement and improved the efficiency of the remaining systems by 30%. Should we be worried? Dr. Kelly asked as they walked together toward the command center. I don't know, Leah admitted. The Concord has never faced a situation like this before. No one has ever breached one of their quarantine barriers. The command center was much brighter than it had been when the humans first arrived. New equipment stood alongside repaired Zalorian technology. Captain Wright and Lieutenant Porter were examining a three-dimensional display of the solar system with Officer Krell. "Ah, Commander," Wright said as they entered. "We were just discussing our new friends at the edge of the system." "Are they Concord ships?" Leah asked. "Definitely," Porter replied. "Palaxian design, the Concord's enforcers." "How many?" "Just 2, for now," Wright said. "Scout vessels most likely. They're staying well back from the barrier, observing." Engineer Martinez entered the room, wiping grease from her hands with a cloth. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform showed signs of the mechanical work she'd been doing. "Got the North Sector power grid back online," she announced proudly. "Should hold for at least—" She trailed off, noticing the serious faces around her. "What did I miss?" "Concord visitors," Porter told her. "Keeping their distance for now." Martinez frowned. "We knew they'd notice eventually. The question is, what will they do about it?" "That depends on how much they value their rules versus their reputation," Wright said. "Attacking a humanitarian mission wouldn't look good, even for the Concord." "You don't know the Palaxians, officer," Krell said darkly. "They care only for the Concord's laws, not how they appear to others." Wright turned to Commander Leah. "How are your people doing with the evacuation drills we discussed?" After the humans arrived, Wright had suggested moving as many Zalorians as possible to hardened shelters, just in case the Concord reacted badly to the humans' interference. The drills had been ongoing for the past week. "Most settlements can now evacuate to secure locations within 30 minutes, Leah reported. "But many of the sick cannot be moved quickly." Dr. Kelly stepped forward. "We've prepared emergency medical transport for the critical cases, but I need at least 2 more days to stabilize the patients in the eastern facility." Wright nodded thoughtfully. "The constellation sensors indicate the Palaxian ships aren't preparing for immediate action. They'll report back to the Concord first. That should give us some time." "And what's our plan if they decide to come in? Force?" Leah asked the question that had been bothering her since the humans first offered their help. "Your 3 ships, impressive as they are, cannot stand against a Concord battle fleet." The humans exchanged glances that Leah couldn't quite interpret. "We have options," Wright said carefully. "The Constellation has defensive capabilities that the Concord hasn't seen before. The Horizon can extend the barrier penetration field to protect key areas, and our 3rd ship, the Dauntless, carries equipment that could complicate things for any attackers." Engineer Martinez smirked slightly. "Let's just say humans got really good at asymmetric warfare back when we were fighting each other. Those skills translate well to space." Leah wasn't entirely reassured. She had seen the power of Concord weapons during military exercises back when the Zalorians were still members in good standing. "Commander," Wright said, noting her concern, "we didn't come here without being prepared for this possibility. Earth doesn't abandon its allies." "Allies?" Leah repeated the word softly. "Is that what we are now?" "From our perspective, yes," Wright confirmed. "Unless you feel differently?" Before Leah could respond, a young Zalorian communications officer burst into the command center. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the Concord Central Authority." The room fell silent. The Concord Central Authority rarely communicated directly with anyone below the level of a planetary governor. For them to contact a quarantined world was unprecedented. "Put it through," Leah ordered after a moment's hesitation. The main display screen flickered and the image of a Valerian appeared. The insectoid species that dominated the Concord had an appearance that many found unsettling, with multiple compound eyes and clicking mandibles. This particular Valerian wore the distinctive green markings of a council representative. "I am Representative Zorn of the Valerian Council," the figure announced without preamble. "We have detected unauthorized vessels within the quarantine zone of Zaloria. This is a direct violation of Concord Isolation Directive 447. All non-Zalorian entities must withdraw immediately or face severe consequences." Captain Wright stepped forward, placing himself next to Commander Leah in the transmission field. Representative Zorn, I am Captain Alan Wright of the Earth Vessel Constellation. We are conducting a humanitarian mission at the request of the Zalorian government. The quarantine directive you reference violates at least 7 provisions of the Galactic Charter regarding assistance to populations in distress. The Valerian's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Earth is not a conquered member. You have no standing to interpret our directives. Perhaps not, Wright replied calmly. But we do have the ability to render aid to those who need. And Dr. Kelly, would you care to update the representative on our progress? Dr. Kelly joined them in view of the transmission. Our medical teams have reduced mortality rates by 60% in just 3 weeks. We've developed a treatment protocol that stabilizes infected individuals, and we're close to a permanent solution. There is no further medical justification for maintaining the quarantine. The Valerian's compound eyes shifted, taking in the human woman. This is irrelevant. The Council's decision stands. You have 24 hours to withdraw your vessels and personnel, or we will take action to enforce the quarantine. The transmission cut off abruptly. The command center was silent for several long moments. Well, Wright said finally, I think that went about as expected. They're really going to attack a medical mission? Engineer Martinez asked, though she didn't sound particularly surprised. Lieutenant Porter was already moving toward the communications station. I'll alert the Dauntless to move into position. Engineer Martinez, we need those shield generators. Online as soon as possible. I'll need 6 hours and a team of 20, she replied, already heading for the door. Commander Leia watched the humans spring into action with practiced efficiency. They had clearly prepared for this outcome. Captain, Wright, she said quietly. My people have already suffered greatly. I cannot ask you to risk a conflict with the Concord on our behalf. Wright turned to her, his expression determined. Commander Leah, you didn't ask us to come. We chose to. And we choose to stay and finish what we started. He smiled slightly. Besides, humans have a long history of standing up to bullies. Some might say we actually enjoy it. The 24-hour deadline set by the Concord passed, and tension filled the Zalorian command center. Long-range sensors showed 6 Palaxian warships now positioned just outside the quarantine barrier. They were arranged in attack formation. Weapon systems active. They're not bluffing, Lieutenant Porter said, studying the tactical display. Those are Palaxian enforcers, heavy combat vessels. They could reduce this entire settlement to ash. Commander Leah stood with Captain Wright and her senior staff as they monitored the situation. The humans had worked through the night, preparing defenses and evacuating vulnerable Zalorians to underground bunkers. The Dauntless, the largest human ship, had moved into position between the settlement and the barrier. What exactly can the Dauntless do against 6 warships? Officer Krell asked. Engineer Martinez grinned. She can't outfight them, but she can make their lives very difficult. We've deployed a resonance field around the quarantine barrier. They can't get through without our permission. How is that possible? Leah asked. The barrier was created by the most advanced technology in the Concord. And we studied it for decades, Captain Wright explained. The Concord hasn't faced a serious technological challenger in centuries. They've grown complacent. The communications officer interrupted. Captain Wright, Commander Leah, we're receiving a transmission from the Palaxian fleet. Put it through, Leah ordered. The main screen lit up with the image of a Palaxian commander. The reptilian species were known throughout the galaxy as the Concord's military enforcers. Cold, efficient, and utterly loyal to the Council. This is Commander Vex of the Concord Enforcement Division, the Palaxian said, his scaled face showing no emotion. Human vessels, you have failed to comply with the withdrawal order. You will power down your ships and surrender immediately, or we will use lethal force. Captain Wright stepped forward. Commander Vex, this is Captain Wright. We are conducting a humanitarian mission here. Dr. Kelly, our chief medical officer, has developed a treatment for the Zalorian plague. There is no further justification for the quarantine. The Council's decisions are not subject to your approval, human, Vex replied coldly. Your interference violates Concord law. Wright's expression hardened. We've extended a resonance field around the quarantine barrier. Your ships cannot penetrate it. Rather than threatening us, I suggest you inform the Council that we wish to negotiate. The Palaxian's eyes narrowed to slits. The Concord does not negotiate with lawbreakers. We have methods to deal with your interference. The transmission cut off abruptly. That didn't go well, Dr. Kelly remarked, having joined them in the command center during the exchange. What did you expect from the Palaxians? Krell said bitterly. They only understand force. Lieutenant Porter moved quickly to a sensor console. They're powering up their main weapons. Looks like they plan to attack the barrier directly. Will that work? Leah asked, alarmed. Engineer Martinez shook her head. Not against our resonance field, but it shows they're not interested in talking. The command center's atmosphere grew tense as they watched the tactical display. The Palaxian ships began firing at the barrier, powerful energy beams striking the invisible field where the quarantine zone ended. The impacts created spectacular flashes of light visible even from the planet's surface. Resonance field holding, Porter reported. They'd need 10 times that firepower to break through. They'll call for reinforcements, Wright said grimly. We need to change the situation before they arrive. How? Leah asked. Before Wright could answer, communications specialist Joe Ramirez entered the command center. The young human had been monitoring Concord transmission since their arrival. Captain, I've got something important, Ramirez said urgently. The Palaxians are broadcasting on all Concord frequencies about this confrontation. Every world in the Alliance is receiving updates about the situation here. Wright raised an eyebrow. Are they now? That's interesting. Why is that significant? Commander Laya asked. Because, Wright explained, the Concord leadership typically keeps their enforcement actions quiet. This public broadcast means they're making a show of force, demonstrating what happens to those who defy them. He smiled suddenly. And that gives us an opportunity. For what? Krell asked skeptically. To tell our side of the story to the entire Concord, Wright said. Ramirez, can you piggyback on their broadcast signal? The communications specialist nodded. I think so, Captain. Their signal compression has vulnerabilities we can exploit. Do it, Wright ordered. And contact the Constellation. I want Dr. Kelly's medical data transmitted along with our message. As Ramirez hurried to comply, Wright turned to Dr. Kelly. Doctor, how close are you to a permanent cure for the plague? We've developed a viable treatment protocol, she replied. With the resources from the Dauntless, we could synthesize enough to treat the entire Zalorian population within 2 weeks. A permanent vaccine would take another month to perfect and distribute. And there are no technical reasons why the quarantine needs to remain in place. None whatsoever, Kelly stated firmly. The plague doesn't affect any species except Zalorians, and our treatment prevents transmission even among them. Perfect, Wright said. That's exactly what the Concord needs to hear. Within an hour, Ramirez had prepared the communication system. The humans had set up a broadcast center in the main hall, with Dr. Kelly's medical data prominently displayed. We're ready, Captain, Ramirez reported. We can break into their transmission at your signal. Wright nodded and turned to Commander Leah. This should be a joint message from both of us. The Concord needs to see that humanity and Zaloria stand together. Leah hesitated only briefly before nodding. What exactly are we doing? Creating a diplomatic incident, Wright said with a slight smile. The Concord abandoned your people to die, claimed there was no cure possible, and now is trying to prevent us from helping. When the other member worlds learn what's happening here, the Council will face serious questions about their leadership. You think that will stop them from attacking? Krell asked doubtfully. The Valerians care about one thing above all else. Their control over the Concord, Wright explained. If that's threatened, they'll be forced to reconsider their approach. They moved to the broadcast center, where a simple setup awaited them. Wright and Leah would stand side by side, with the medical data showing behind them. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1, Ramirez counted down, then gave them a signal to begin. Attention, peoples of the Galactic Concord, Wright began. I am Captain Alan Wright of Earth. With me is Commander Leah of Zaloria. We are speaking to you because the Concord Council has hidden the truth. Leah spoke next, her voice steady. My people were abandoned by the Concord, left to die from a plague our scientists accidentally created. The Council claimed there was no cure possible and established a quarantine that prevented anyone from helping us. That was a lie. Wright continued. Earth medical teams have already reduced the death rate by 60%. We have developed a treatment that works and we are close to a permanent cure. The data you see is proof. Dr. Kelly stepped into view, explaining the medical findings in clear, simple terms that anyone could understand. She detailed how the plague affected only Zalorians, how their treatment worked, and why the quarantine was medically unnecessary. The Concord Council is now threatening military action against a humanitarian mission, Leah concluded. They would rather see my people die than admit they were wrong. Wright looked directly into the camera. To all Concord worlds watching this, ask yourselves what kind of leadership abandons an entire civilization to die, then tries to prevent others from saving them. Is this the Concord you want to be part of? Is this the future you envision for the galaxy? Ramirez gave them a signal that the transmission had ended. For a few moments, the broadcast center was silent. What now? Leah asked quietly. Now, Wright said, we wait to see if the Valerians care more about their pride or their political control. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, the main communication system signaled an incoming transmission. It's not from the Palaxian fleet, Ramirez reported, surprised. It's from the Concord diplomatic vessel Harmony. They're requesting permission to approach the barrier. Wright and Leah exchanged glances of cautious optimism. It seems, Wright said, that the Council may be ready to talk after all. 2 months had passed since the confrontation with the Palaxian fleet. The Zalorian capital city gleamed in the morning sunlight, its crystal towers catching the light and sending rainbow reflections across the plaza where Commander Leah stood, with Captain Wright. They watched as the energy barrier that had imprisoned the Zalorians for so long finally disappeared from the sky. It's really over, Leah said quietly. The quarantine is officially lifted, Wright confirmed. As of today, Zaloria is free to rejoin the galactic community. The negotiations with the Concord had been tense but ultimately successful. When Representative Zorn arrived on the diplomatic vessel Harmony, he had found himself in a difficult position. The humans' broadcast had reached every corner of the Concord, creating a political crisis for the Valerian Council. Many member worlds were openly questioning why a cure for the Zalorian plague had been withheld. Dr. Kelly's medical data had been impossible to deny. Her treatment protocol had completely stopped the plague's spread, and the cure she and the Zalorian scientists developed had saved countless lives. There was no longer any medical justification for the quarantine. Look, Wright pointed to the sky where several ships were now descending toward the spaceport. Your first visitors. Leah watched as vessels from various worlds approached. Many were merchant ships eager to resume trade with Zaloria. But she noted that they were primarily from rim worlds and independent systems, not from the core conquered planets. They come for profit, not to help, she observed. Wright smiled slightly. That's often how it starts, commerce before compassion, but at least they're coming. They walked together toward the government complex, which had been relocated back to the surface now that the plague was gone. Earth engineers had helped rebuild much of the city's infrastructure, combining Zalorian technology with human innovations. The result was a city more efficient and resilient than before the crisis. Inside the main council chamber, representatives from both species were finalizing details of the Earth-Zaloria alliance. Engineer Martinez was demonstrating a new power system to a group of Zalorian technicians, while Lieutenant Porter and Officer Krell discussed security arrangements for the growing number of ships arriving in the system. Captain Wright, Commander Leah, Dr. Kelly greeted them as they entered. She looked tired but satisfied. I've just received confirmation from the last outlying settlement. The plague is officially eradicated, not a single active case remains. That's wonderful news, Doctor, Leah said warmly. I couldn't have done it without your scientists, Kelly acknowledged. Especially Professor Venn. His insights were crucial to the final vaccine. The elderly professor had survived to see his people saved, though his health remained fragile. He now served as a special advisor to the new Zalorian government. Communications specialist Ramirez approached with a data tablet. "Captain, we're receiving requests for the medical protocols from 17 different worlds, not all of them Concord members. Share everything," Wright instructed. "The treatment and vaccine should be available to anyone who needs them." "What about the resonance field technology?" Leah asked more quietly. "Will Earth share that as well?" Wright's expression became more serious. "That's a more complicated question. The Council is already concerned about how quickly humanity has advanced. Giving everyone the ability to bypass their security measures would create more problems than it solves." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a Zalorian messenger. "Commander, the Earth vessel Pathfinder has entered orbit. Captain Chris Evans requests permission to land." Wright smiled. "The Pathfinder is right on schedule. She's bringing the diplomatic team that will establish Earth's permanent embassy here." "And what about you, Captain Wright?" Leah asked. "Will you be returning to Earth with the Constellation?" Before Wright could answer, the chamber's main doors opened to admit Representative Zorn. The Valerian had remained on Zaloria to oversee the Concord's official recognition of the end of the quarantine. The room fell silent as the Concord official approached Leah and Wright. Despite the successful negotiations, many Zalorians still viewed the Valerian with suspicion and resentment. "Commander Leah, Captain Wright," Zorn greeted them formally. "The barrier deactivation has been confirmed by Concord sensors. Zaloria is officially recognized as a sovereign system once more." "Thank you, Representative," Leah replied with cool politeness. "Will the Concord be offering any assistance with our continued recovery efforts?" The Valerian's mandibles clicked softly. "The Council has approved a limited aid package. However, given Zaloria's new association with Earth, many Council members feel your needs are already being addressed." Wright suppressed a smile. The Valerian's discomfort with the human-Zalorian alliance was obvious. "We appreciate any assistance the Concord chooses to provide," Wright said diplomatically. "Earth and Zaloria remain open to positive relations with all peaceful worlds." After the representative departed, Leah and Wright moved to the chamber's balcony, which overlooked the revitalized city. In the distance, they could see the Pathfinder landing at the spaceport, bringing more humans to strengthen the growing bond between their worlds. "7 systems have already contacted us about establishing direct relations with Earth," Wright said. "They're bypassing the Concord's protocols entirely." "The Concord is fracturing," Leah observed. "Not fracturing," Wright corrected gently. "Evolving. For too long, the Valerians and their closest allies have dictated terms to everyone else. What happened to Zaloria showed the galaxy that the Council will abandon anyone when it's convenient." Leah turned to face the human who had saved her civilization. "You never answered my question, Captain. Will you be returning to Earth?" Wright smiled. "Eventually, yes, but not immediately. Earth has asked me to serve as our first ambassador to Zaloria. If that's acceptable to your people, of course." Leah felt a surge of genuine happiness at this news. Over the past months, she had come to deeply respect Alan Wright. His leadership, courage, and compassion had not only saved her people but had shown them a new way forward. "I think that would be very acceptable," she said. "Though I must warn you, being the first human ambassador here will not be easy. Many on both sides will resist the changes this alliance brings." "The best things rarely come easily," Wright replied. "Besides, humans have a saying, 'A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor.'" Below them, in the city streets, Zalorians and humans moved about together. The humans' arrival had brought not just medical aid but hope, technology, and a new perspective. The Zalorians, once abandoned by the galaxy, had found unexpected allies who valued them for who they were, not what they could provide. "When the Concord abandoned us," Leah said thoughtfully, "I believed it was the end of our civilization. I never imagined it would instead be a new beginning." "That," Wright said with a warm smile, "is perhaps the most human observation you could make. When one door closes, we look for windows, or build our own doors." As the sun set over the revitalized Zalorian capital, The first stars became visible in the darkening sky. For the first time in many months, those stars no longer represented an impassable barrier but a road to a new future, one that Silurians and humans would explore together.